So, one of the ways I used to treat my socially anxious clients, so maybe they were worried about going to a party. And one approach to that would be to teach them relaxation exercises and to encourage them not to focus on their own experience. But when you tell someone not to think about something, they tend to think about it more, right? Right. So what I did was I said, well, go to that party and pick a couple of people and try to make them comfortable.
That's interesting. Yeah, a little jujitsu there. That makes sense.
It worked like a charm, because, well, first of all, as soon as most of these people who were socially anxious had some social skill, not all of them. Some of them were very badly socialized and they were anxious because they just didn't know how to behave in a social environment. But some of them had social skills that they'd shut off because of their anxiety. And then if they focused on being hospitable, let's say, then, well, they weren't thinking about themselves, and then they were effective and their anxiety went away and they started to flow into a natural conversation. So, another thing worth pointing out, say, on the hedonism front is that not only is short-term gratification of your whims a bad strategy, even to gratify them, but because it's associated with self-consciousness, because it's associated with what you want right now, it's also a direct pathway to high levels of negative emotion.
Absolutely. So part of depression is self-consciousness. You look at like definitions of depression, part of it in there, it's that neuroticism piece. And thinking about yourself is not a recipe for happiness. Like, think about anything about yourself. And also what you're saying is great with, you're talking about that as a manipulation to deal with social anxiety. You also see that in some of the social psych work on egotism, where people want self-esteem. You can say, hey, here's your new roommate. Go get some self-esteem from your roommate. Or you can say, hey, go form a good relationship with your roommate. People who go out and try to form a good relationship with the roommate end up getting self-esteem. The people who try to get self-esteem don't get self-esteem. So the self-esteem is sort of a side effect or epiphenomenon of forming close relationships with people. But if you go directly
that's so important.
Yeah.
Well, it's so important to say that because I was so appalled for like 20 years about the self-esteem movement because I knew that from the personality front. It's like you're not teaching self-esteem, you're teaching something like fragile narcissism. That's a very bad thing to teach kids. Yeah, it's really bad. And your point is exactly right. It's like what we call self-esteem, which is really regulation of negative emotion to a large degree, is actually obtained by establishing long-term functional reciprocal relationships, right? And so because those are stable and reliable, that decreases negative emotion. And most self-esteem measures are primarily neuroticism, like there's extroversion in there, but it's primarily neuroticism reversed. So yeah, it's so interesting that, and psychologists could do this. They could teach people, we've done a bad job of this, that the best pathway to emotional self-regulation is through service to other people, right? And that's a great deal for everybody.
A long time ago, Gene Twenge and I took a look at this and wrote a book called The Narcissism Epidemic. And we were looking at the cultural changes really emerging out of the self-esteem movement and other things. And that's exactly what you found is people said, well, we need to give kids self-esteem. So what we'll do is make them feel special. I'm like, that's a disaster. The way you make people self-esteem is you have, positive, loving relationships and age-appropriate challenges so they can get some confidence and a sense of connection. And as you pointed out, relationships are a long-term, durable source of well-being. I mean, I can be close to my siblings for 50, 70 years, hopefully, if we make it. Getting self-esteem from winning or being cool or attractive is a shorter term gain, thrill of victory, agony of defeat. And it's very hard to be relevant for a long time. So just in terms of the strategy, if you want to like yourself, focus on relationships. That's going to work.